This is Michael Osterlink. Welcome to O Radio, where we explore individual and social transformation through collaborative action. I'm a psychotherapist with a transpersonal and somatic specialization. I'm also a transpartisan social entrepreneur and head instructor at SILFIT's Unbeatable Mind Academy and executive coach at Spartan 7. Today's show is brought to you by Synergy Float Center, a premier flotation therapy center located in Old Town Alexandria in Virginia. When you take time to slow down, amazing things can happen. Take care of yourself by booking a float, sauna, or one of the other many services today. You can book online at synergyfloatcenter.com. Today's guest is Dr. Kirk Parsley, MD, who is a former Navy SEAL turned physician for the SEALs, turned health and sleep optimization consultant and performance enhancement coach for some of the most driven achievers on the planet. Dr. Parsley has been a member of the Academy of Sleep Medicine since 2006. And has served as Navy Special Warfare's expert on sleep medicine. He is certified in hormone modulation, age management medicine, and continues to consult for multiple corporations and professional athletes and teams. Dr. Parsley is a creator of Dr. Parsley Sleep Remedy, sleep supplement, lectures worldwide on sleep, wellness, and hormonal optimization. He's also the author of the international bestseller book, Sleep to Win. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Michael?
Good. Good to see you, man.
Yeah. Long time no chat.
It has been a while. So we're going
to I had to push my monitor back a little bit because I felt like you were closer than 6 feet. And it's like, it's too big and too close. Like I shouldn't be able to touch it.
How's that? Should you spray me?
Yeah.
Are you practicing safe computing?
Yeah. Did you hear about that that elderly woman that got punched in the ER by another woman?
No.
Yeah, some I think she was like 86 or 89 or something, and she went to the emergency room with a bowel obstruction, and one of the patients in there saw that it's like a 40-something-year-old woman saw that the woman wasn't maintaining her 6 feet distance and got upset and jumped up and slapped her and knocked her to the ground. She cracked her head open and died.
Oh my God.
And the woman who hit her is on trial for criminal mischievousness or something like that. I'm pretty sure that should be like manslaughter, but even worse, right? Because manslaughter, you don't intentionally hit somebody. It's just like, you drive your car, you don't pay attention, you drive your car, you drink and drive or something like that. But she actually meant to cause harm.
Yeah.
Just didn't mean to kill her. So maybe that should be murder second degree or something. But crazy, like how, this is right up your alley, man. Yeah, the thing that this makes me think of, and then we can get to the actual show, but just like an aside that popped in my head. This is what I've just been kind of ruminating over. So, anybody with a psychology, any kind of formal psychology degree has been kind of presented with that information that you would have probably been a Nazi too. If you lived in Germany, like you would have done the horrible things that those people did. And everyone wants to say, oh no, not me. I wouldn't have done that. But if you look at how people are starting to treat each other after like a week of being inside and the bile and vitriol that people are attacking others for because they don't think they're engaging in the right rules. They're not being socially responsible. They're putting people at risk, and I hate them, and I want them to die, and I want awful things, and I want them arrested, and all this other stuff. All right, well, there's the beginning. Like there's the first step of proof you need right there that this could go really, really, really badly if it's not handled well.
Speaking of that, I've actually seen online people referring to people as locust and other such kind of dehumanizing names like them over there. Either
right.
They're people or, however they want to contextualize it, but like just dehumanizing groups of people, which is not new, but I would imagine just speaking to what you're talking to, we'll just see increasing numbers of people doing that to each other.
And some high level executive just got fired. I forget what her job was, but something political, I think, but a high level, high profile executive at a big corporation was publishing like Facebook tweets or something, or whatever the hell it is, Facebook tweet. I'm mixing my social platforms there. But she was posting things on social media basically saying that all Trump supporters should give up their ventilators to someone else and die. It's like, wow. I mean, that's that's not something you say, even if you like, those are inside words, even if you feel it, you know, just the fact that anybody feels like that would ever be okay to put in a social environment, it just seems really strange to me. I mean, that's like, you know, that's something a drunk 16-year-old boy would say, you know, that's not something that an adult with a functioning prefrontal cortex would post, you know, and that just, crazy. All right.
This is definitely a social experiment. I mean, if you
Yeah.
want to kind of look at a 30,000-foot view at the species level,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really fascinating if you just want to be dispassionate about it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and no matter how quickly this stuff, the restrictions get lifted, you know, there's going to be social and economic impact that, you know, we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of interesting things in the world to come.
Yeah, and I think from the psychology point of view, I think unfortunately we'll see people revert back to older, less evolved behaviors.
Right.
Majority of people, that just seems to be the tendency under stress. And
Right.
there's usually a select few who kind of evolve past where we are.
Right.
But
yeah, and what's really scary about that, I agree with you 100%. What's really scary about that is that we've already been, you know, over the last decade or so, we've really been reverting towards this more tribal nature, right? Just like the whole, what do they call it when they kind of, they're dividing themselves into social groups based on like one thing, like their sexual orientation. Like there's a name for it, I'm blanking on it. But you know, it's like it's us and them, and it's like, you know, we're the oppressed ones because we have this color skin, or we're the oppressed ones because we live here, or we're the oppressed ones because we have the sexual preference, or we're the oppressed ones whatever. And so there's all these little micro tribes, you know, growing all around the country. And then you add something like this, it's like just, you know, kind of shutting off the prefrontal cortex again to say that. And like, we're going back to the lizard brain type of behavior, you know, which is fight, flee, fornicate, and freeze, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of like basal behaviors, like what people do on Ambien, because their neocortex gets shut right off. How do you like that segue? You see that?
Oh my God, that's
right in.
That's a brilliant segue to talking about sleep, stress, and immune function.
Yeah, we should probably talk about something that I'm actually educated in instead of me spewing my opinions about all this stuff.
We'll get to Ambien in a minute.
Okay.
But it's actually interesting because you did talk about the prefrontal cortex and kind of like losing that capability and empowering the more lizard part of your brain. And that would seem to me, from reading the research and listening to you give lectures and stuff over the years, that is par for the course when you're sleep deprived, no?
Absolutely. And what, you know, I've just my nature, like I'm really trying to analyze myself and make sure I don't have like this superhero complex that I'm trying to save everybody. I really feel like this is coming from a good place, but I am like so impassioned every day to get out of bed and settle people down, man. You know, put a denominator on the stuff that the media is not putting denominators on. And the primary reason for that is to decrease stress. And the primary reason to decrease stress is to improve the quality of people's lives, but secondarily to improve the likelihood that the community is going to survive, right? And so if everybody's running around stressed all the time, and it's us and them and our tribe and their tribe, and, you know, competition, everybody hating each other, we're doomed no matter what happens. Like, the virus is then the least important part here, right? It's like the social behavior is what's going to kill us, not the virus. So, you know, what I keep harping on people about, you know, the reason I want you to, you know, when the newspaper says, you know, death rate skyrockets, that's an emotionally charged word. So first of all, like, do yourself a favor and don't read that crap. You know, like, go to NIH, go to CDC, go to, you know, World Media, like get raw data and, like, you know, and put your own narrative on it. Like, you don't need other people's narratives right now. But, you know, in the absence of that, if you're exposed to these narratives, like, you know, these emotionally charged words, you know, things that we're doomed and things are plummeting, that, you know, economy's plummeting and free fall and the deaths are skyrocketing, and like, well, those words don't mean anything, right? But they're put in there for a reason. They're put in there to cause emotional stir. And we don't need that right now. That's the worst thing. So when you go, Okay, well, deaths went from 3,000 to 4,000 really quickly. Okay, that's a big deal. But okay, how many people have died, period, over the last month, and how many of those people died from coronavirus, right? And so if you look at that, it's like it's significantly less than 1%, right? It's like something like 0.03% of all deaths have, in the last 3 months have been from coronavirus. That probably isn't where you should putting your focus if you have a 99.97% chance of dying of something else. You probably shouldn't be worried about dying from this. And all of your loved ones are the same way. So if we can decrease that stress, like if we can give people denominators and reframe things and get them, now we can decrease stress. And when I say it's good, it's obviously good for mood. Everybody knows it's good for mood and socialization. But what a lot of people don't know is that when you're under enough stress, when your stress hormones are high enough, there's no longer a willpower component to it, right? We know in fight or flight, you have no voluntary control at all almost, right? Like everything is an impulse. Everything is basal brain, right? It's all lizard brain stuff by design. It helps you to not think in that situation. And your lungs dilate and you take in more air, and your pupils dilate and you take in more light and a broader field of vision. You hyper focus on whatever that threat is. You start mobilizing your stored glucose, your glycogen stores. That increases your blood glucose. Your heart rate goes up. Your blood pressure go up. Your peripheral blood vessels dilate. You start getting more, and you become faster and stronger and more enduring with faster reflexes and a higher pain threshold, and like all this amazing stuff. So you're almost like a superhero version of yourself, right? Just like you're running at the absolute maximum performance this body can give you. But what's not happening, we alluded to it. You're not thinking, period. You're not thinking. Yeah. You're not categorizing anything. You're not interpreting anything other than threat, no threat, threat, no threat. Like that's all. There's no higher order thinking going on. Your immune system isn't working, right, at all, because your immune system doesn't matter if you're under fight or flight. If you don't get away from that threat, doesn't matter if you can fight off infection. Doesn't matter if you can repair tissues. Doesn't matter if you can do anything. Doesn't matter if you can digest. Doesn't matter if you can reproduce. You have to get out of this. And so all of that's impaired. And so if fight or flight's here, well, we know the exact opposite of fight or flight is deep sleep. I mean, that's the lowest stress hormones you will ever have at any time of your day, at any time of your life, is during slow wave sleep. And it's exactly the opposite. Your body is almost completely useless, right? You can't fight, you can't flee, you can't, your eyes still work, your ears still work, like everything still works. You're just not paying attention to it. You're not processing anything. But your digestion is maxed out and your immune system is maxed out, and all your repairs, all your anabolic behaviors, your brain is remodeling itself, right? It's emotionally categorizing things. It's connecting the dots between information you've learned today and the stuff you already knew. It's getting rid of junk and making durable pathways for things that seem important. So, and that's how you want to approach the day, right? Like, wouldn't you, like if I said, hey, here are your options, like we're going to approach this crisis either stressed out with you in fight or flight, or in the most cerebral, calm, rational place you could possibly be with the most amount of resources for that area. Because nobody's going to have to fist fight this virus off, right? Like, we need to fight off the fear of this virus. We need to shine the light into the darkness and get rid of the fear. That's going to allow us to make better decisions. That's going to make us more socially responsible. That'll make me more likely to treat somebody else with empathy and kindness. If I feel like they're threatening the community, I might go, well, maybe there's a reason they're threatening the community, right? I don't know, like who knows, like any scenario you can envision, like there's always a reason, right? And yeah, maybe some people are being flippant about it, but if I'm under stress, I will perceive that as a threat, right? The closer I am to fight or flight, the less intellectual cognitive capacity I have to consider why something's happening.
Let's make a distinction, if you would, between acute stress response for a real threat versus what I hear you talking about is really a chronic stress response, which is not short-lived, but over the long haul, which then has all these negative consequences. Because I think it's important for the listening viewing audience to understand, like an acute stress response, if there's a real threat, is completely legitimate. You don't want to necessarily be in a relaxed parasympathetic space because you can't necessarily survive so well, but you
Right.
don't want to be in a chronic stress state, because then you have all the consequences that you're speaking about. Can you kind of make those distinctions and talk about the differences?
Yeah. So, and the way I like to explain it is, if, um, and you know, I'm going to tie some big concepts together here that I'll be layman enough to where it'll be slightly inaccurate, but the concept is in the concept of the metaphor is good. So if we just take those two pieces and go, okay, there's two extremes we can be in. We can be in fight or flight, and we can be in deep sleep. And those are the exact opposite ends of the spectrum as far as our physiology is concerned, right? So important thing to realize, you know, cortisol being the primary stress hormone people talked about, so we'll just use that as the marker. So cortisol comes up, right, from that first deep sleep segment. You go to, you know, in your first sleep section of the night, that's the lowest level of cortisol you're going to have for, you know, 24 hours until you come back to sleep. And then it progressively creeps up over the night. And at some point, it is, the level of cortisol is high enough to make you awake, right? Now, it goes up a little bit during the day, depending on your environment. But here's the important thing to realize is that you need that to be awake. And to be awake means that you're responding to your environment, right? So an extrapolation of that is you need that to respond to your environment. The more dangerous your environment is, the more cortisol, the more calm your environment is, the less cortisol, right? So you can get through the day with a moderate amount of cortisol if you don't have a lot of threats and a lot of stressors and a lot of things that are threatening your well-being, or your vision for the future that you have for yourself. And so in order to keep things relative, I just say the cortisol system is essentially protecting you from external threats. So stuff outside of my skin, my immune system for that is my adrenal system, right? My adrenal cortical system, which is my cortisol system. Once something gets into my body, I have an immune system, right? That we know that has two branches. And between those two things, I'm covered for anything threatening me out there and anything threatening me inside. Again, those two things are at opposite extremes though, right? If something's threatening my body outside, I can't do anything about the inside. I don't have the resources. There's a certain amount of resources. So, you know, you mentioned parasympathetic. I'm sure most of your listeners know that, you know, there's a sympathetic and a parasympathetic of the autonomic. You call it the automatic. So, you know, it's controlling things beyond your conscious control. Well, the more parasympathetic you are, to an extreme, again, I'm being overly generalized here, but the more parasympathetic you are, the more anabolic you are. And what does anabolic mean? Anabolic means that you're taking substrate from the environment and you're making bigger, stronger things. That's anabolic, right? Anabolic steroids make bodybuilders put on big muscles. But every organ in your body has potential of being anabolic or catabolic. Catabolic is taking big structures and breaking them down into fuel sources. So in that example, when I was talking about the fight or flight, the cortisol leading to the release of stored glycogen, well, that glycogen was formed under anabolic state. It's providing you reserve fuel. Well, we're under so much stress, we want to call on those reserves and we want to pull them all out. So now I'm catabolic. Well, it's designed for that, but I'm catabolic. Same thing with my muscles. My muscles are the best protein source for me when I'm catabolic. So if I don't have enough amino acids in my bloodstream and I need to be on it, I need to be using, I need amino acids to fuel myself, well, then I'm going to get it from my body. So chronic stress and chronic sleep deprivation, you really can't distinguish between the two of them, right? They're the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin, right? So when you have high stress hormones, you're more catabolic, right? You're less anabolic, the more sympathetic you are. And we can tie those two together fairly loosely, again, layman's terms. The more cortisol, the more sympathetic, right? Like you're just heading that way. You know, the more rest and relax, the more parasympathetic. So if we know there's like an ideal range in there, which is kind of like the way you evolved. So when you get out of bed and you say, let's say, cortisol of 100 is fight or flight, and maybe you get out of bed with a cortisol of 15, right? And that's enough to keep you awake. And if you're going to lay on your couch and read a book, you might be 15 or 20, like for a while. But then if somebody crashes into the front of your house, you're probably going to go to 50, right? Or, somebody starts shooting, you're probably going to 100, right? Like, so it's going to keep you alert in proportion. Well, let's say that you're under chronic stress, right? So acute stress would be, we have anabolic reserves, something happens, there's a finite period to solve this issue. Once that issue goes away, I don't need to think about it anymore. So we're going to do that fight or flight. We're going to have all anabolic reserves we need. Everything's going to be stationed. We're going to get rid of that stress and everything's going to recover. When we go to sleep that night, everything's going to be reset. All of our hormones are going to be reset. And that's, anabolic hormones include the hormones that drive your appetite and how you partition fuel, whether or not your brain is sensing your body fat, like whether or not you're hungry, what your impulse control is, like all this is tied to anabolic versus catabolic. So the acute stressor, the system is perfect for that, right? Our internal immune system, it's good for the long haul. It's good for a long fight, right? Like you get a virus in there, it takes you 2 weeks to fight it off, no problem. Like constant round the clock, you'll be tired because you're using fuel, right? You're using stored fuel to fight off this infection, but like that system's designed to do that a lot better. The external system is not designed to be sustained. And when you're sustained, the really simplistic way of looking at that is going, well, you're just closer to fight or flight. The longer you're close to fight or flight, the more your phenotypic expression is going to be consistent with something in fight or flight. So I just said, you're going to be catabolic. You're going to waste muscle, right? Like you're going to lose muscle. You're going to have poor glucose control. You're going to have poor cognitive poor cognitive functioning. Your simulator, as Sapolsky calls it, right? Your prefrontal cortex that allows you to go, and based on everything I'm receiving, I think I could do these 3 things, and this would probably lead to that, and that would probably lead to this. So I'm going to choose this. Like that's prefrontal cortex. That's what everybody needs in modern society all the time right now. But especially during this, we need this to the nth degree, because now we can look at, we can look at some inflated, jargon or numbers meant to present the worst case scenario as the inevitable, and we can go, come on, like, what does that really mean? Do I really believe that? And now we can control our stress so that we don't run around at a cortisol of 50 instead of 15 or 20.
And I just want to kind of stop for a second. And it's important, I think, to note that when you're rational in that space, when you have the prefrontal cortex activated, and you're taking better decisions in terms of like how you read the signs in the environment or signals in the environment, doesn't mean, and it also would mean too, that you take appropriate steps to protect yourself and your family and your community, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. And that's what the big human brain is good for, right? We don't risk getting attacked by predators every night, because we use our brains to build societies and communities and have fences and law enforcement and houses and, so what's made us so safe on this planet and what's made us the top species on this planet is our brain. You don't want to give that thing up. Our bodies really kind of suck, right? Compared to any other animals. Like I wouldn't want to fight a raccoon, right? Like that's not a dangerous animal, but like we're not that great at being predators unless we have tools, right? Weapons that we can forge and so forth. So it's really important to preserve that. And one of the biggest problems with impairing your neocortex in general, but more specifically your prefrontal cortex, is that your introspection goes down as that function goes down. So you are making worse decisions. You're doing dumber things, right? You're losing your willpower. You're being more impulsive. You're taking more risk than you should be taking, but you're not even aware of it. It's not like you're saying, hey, I'm going to throw caution to the wind because my brain thinks I'm starving or my brain thinks I'm being preyed upon, right? So the only time any animal on this planet sleep deprives themselves is if they're starving to death, they're in a famine, so they need to wake up earlier and go to sleep later so they can forage and go farther and find more food. And if they're being preyed upon, so if they're being stalked by a predator, they're going to get very little sleep and they're going to keep getting up and going. Now, the other thing that happens to us as well when we sleep deprive ourselves is they become much more impulsive, and that's a protective thing, right? Because if I'm starving to death, I'm going to try to eat something I've never eaten before because it looks a little dangerous. Or I need to get, like if I'm a bear, I need to get all the way down to that house and get in their trash can. Whereas before I wouldn't have done that. But now it's like, it's driving for survival. And, you know, if you're chronically running around at this high level and your brain is chronically functioning like that, you're going to function like something other than the smartest species on this planet, and definitely something lower than the optimal you. And it has huge catabolic effects, right? I mean, the reason we tend to, or not the reason, one of the reasons we tend to die when we get older is we have fewer resources. You know, how many 6'4", 250-pound muscular 80-year-old men do you see? Right? You don't, because you become more catabolic over time, and like you break it down, you have fewer resources, right? Our thymus shrinks, like there's some other reasons for the immunity, but I mean, you basically have less capacity to handle stress, and you know, an illness that ends your life is stress, right? It's a form of stress.
Let me ask you about, on the acute side, you talk about the reserves that are necessary to get you through an acute episode. You had the stress response, and you kind of laid out a lot of the stress response, what that looks like, and the need for the reserves. I have to imagine that us as a people here in the United States, maybe Western Europe as well, but mostly here in the States, because of our generally poor sleep, our poor nutrition, our lack of fitness and movement, you know, those kind of things, that our reserves are even worse than many others, and what's actually needed to get through an acute stress response, let alone how to deal with a chronic stress response. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So, you know, the unfortunate reality is that we're not all equal, you know, regardless of what anyone wants to say. You know, we have the Olympics for a reason, because we're not all equal, right? Like, you know, nobody wants to see me figure skate or, you know, run 100 meters or run a marathon, like, because I'm not sensational. Like, I'm not super capable in that. So why would anybody, you know, be amazed by my capacity? Like, we're not all equal, right? You know, people are smarter, people are more capable. And guess what? People's bodies are more resilient, right? Some people's immune systems work better. Some people can take a lot more damage. Some people can sustain a highly stressed, highly catabolic situation for a really long time, and they don't break down as quickly as other people. And so, like, there's this misnomer about the super sleepers. Have you heard of this? Like, there's this gene combination that they found, and what you'll hear about is there's this gene combination that's been found, and the people who have it, they only need 5 hours of sleep a night or something like that. So it's not true, right? What the gene combination has shown, and the research just gets bastardized because people make it fit their narrative. What the research has showed is that they suffer less. They decay more slowly than the average person with that amount of sleep deprivation.
For our biohacking friends, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is no situation in any research anywhere in the world over the history of sleep research, which isn't that long, like 70, 80 years, I don't know. There's no situation ever where it's shown that anybody does better, thrives off of less than approximately 8 hours, like pretty damn close to 8 hours, within probably 20 or 30 minutes of that. There are people who suffer less, right? Just like, you know, you can think about somebody who goes through SEAL training, for example.
Jocko, who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Like Jocko gets up at 4:30 every morning and beats himself into submission and works out like a beast and just goes. And he's still a healthy guy. Like, most people can't handle that, right? Like, most people can't do that. You know, your resiliency, like, there's obviously a mental toughness component that can be developed. There's physical strength and mass that can be developed. But at the end of the day, there's genetic, right? Like, I could train the rest of my life and I could have trained from the day I was born and I would have never been able to outbox Mike Tyson, right? Like I don't have the genetics to be Mike Tyson. Or, you know, any other example. Like I could have studied computers and I wouldn't have outperformed Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. I mean, there's potential. So it does no good to compare yourself to other people for that reason, right? So your ability to sustain stress should be measured by you. So there are things that are important to you. And so when I talk to people, you know, outside the pandemic, when I'm just saying, hey, what are your goals? What do you want to perform better at, or what do you want to continue to perform good at? Well, in it doesn't matter. Like I don't care if you want to be a better father, or you want to be a better CEO, or you want to make more money, or you want to be faster or stronger or leaner, or, you know, more zen. Like I don't care. Like whatever your goal is, that's your goal, right? There's something you're working towards. And the great news is that the way to reach all of that is exactly the same. It's all sleep, nutrition, activity / exercise, and stress mitigation, right? Some sort of mindfulness, or, you know, some sort of stress control component in your life. That's it. The 4 pillars are the 4 pillars are the 4 pillars forever. Like that's there. Like, and so it doesn't matter what the stressor is. So right now, obviously people are saying, well, I want to get through this period as quickly as possible. Well, you don't have any control over that. I want to get through this as unscathed as possible. You have control over that. And I want the community to be unscathed as much as possible. We have control over that too, right? Because me being the optimal me, and you being the optimal you, and my neighbor being the optimal him, and this other neighbor being the optimal her, we now function as a society better because I'm performing better as an individual and every one of us are. And we have a better chance of getting out of this and having a good outcome. Now, you know, if we go back 3 months or go forward 6 months, you know, people's goals will be the other things that I've talked about, but it's exactly the same. If you want to be faster, stronger, better looking, smarter, a better guitar player, a better parent, a better spouse, a better lover, but doesn't matter, same things. And supplements are supplemental, right? You add this by definition. You optimize the 4 pillars and then you supplement on top of that.
Let's talk about that. So let's just say you have someone who's dialed in their nutrition. Mm-hmm. So, you know, following our friend Rob, their paleo-ish, keto-ish, or whatever their thing is, right?
Right. Whatever their ism is at the time.
Yeah. Like. Exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a whole foods, you know, less processed, less standard American diet crap.
Yeah, they're eating food, right? I like to simplify. It's like eat food. Food, that's the stuff your grandparents would have considered food. That's food. Like just eat that.
Perfect.
Weigh and measure if you want to. Just eat food.
They're doing that.
Yeah.
They're down in their stress because, you know, they're doing meditation or some somatic or awareness practice to manage their stress, arousal control. Right. They're doing some fitness and movement. Maybe they're doing CrossFit and some martial arts or barre, you know, whatever their thing is. They have movement and fitness practices throughout the day and throughout the weeks. Let's now talk about it.
And to be clear, if they're not exercisers and they don't have physical fitness goals, they might just need to do their own gardening and wash their own cars and clean their own house, and not like they don't need to be on a fitness schedule unless they have fitness goals, right?
Roger that. Right. Okay, fair enough. So let's say they dialed all that in, even on the fitness side, they're just washing the car, gardening, whatever, going for a walk with their dogs. Something, some movement. They're not just sitting behind their computers or in front of the television. Right. Let's talk about the sleep part. Because, you know, you've already pointed out that everyone needs some version of close to 8 hours of sleep. There's no getting around it. If you do less than that, you're actually, you might be able to make it longer than others in terms of degradation, but you're still heading in the wrong direction.
Right.
But a lot of Americans use sleep aids. And we started this conversation after that unfortunate example you gave of that woman of Ambien. And a lot of Americans use sleep aids like that, Ambien or other over-the-counter prescription drugs. Can you talk about why those are not really helpful, and actually they're counterindicated if you actually want good sleep? First, we'll start.
Yeah, I mean, they're really contraindicated at this point. You know, this is different than 10 years ago, probably. I don't know if you and I met that long ago, but close to that time, where the pharmaceutical industry was still controlling the data around sleep aids. And so even though I was up there saying how bad they were, I didn't know how bad they were even, right? Because it turns out that once they got, successfully sued a lot for the side effects of their drugs. And then they had to sort of turn over more data. And like, once they turned over more data, it turns out that sleep aids don't really make you sleep more. They change the subjective experience of sleep so that people feel like they've slept more. But I want to say it's something like 16 minutes, 20 minutes difference total. But equally as important, if not more important, is what we call the sleep architecture, right? So when you get in bed to go to sleep, you go through progressive, predictable stages, and you stay in a sleep cycle for a sort of fairly predictable amount of time. So you'll get into bed and you'll be in stage 1 sleep as you start drifting off. And like I was talking about earlier, all of your senses still work, right? It's not like your eyeballs get turned off or your ears get turned off. Like, everything still works, just your neocortex isn't processing it, right? You aren't, like, none of the sensation means anything until we process it, right? So we slowly quit processing it. Once we quit processing it, we go into what we call sleep, which means that we're not paying attention to our environment. Now, it's still there, right? Because a loud noise can still wake us up, and a bright light flashing would wake us up. Even though our eyes work, but we aren't paying attention to them. But if the light flashes, it'll wake us up. I unfortunately learned that. I put this on my phone. There's because I hate to have my ringer on. I hate that ping. But there's certain times I don't want to miss. It's important. I'm waiting for something. And so you can turn on the strobe where it'll flash if somebody's calling you, or if you get a text, it'll flash. So I was laying in bed, and sometime I was asleep, and it somehow got incorporated into my dream. That was on, and there was like this. It was like this drum beat. It was like this thumping. I literally felt like I was getting punched. It was like this assault to my senses. Boom, 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 boom. And I was laying there, I closed my eyes. I'm going, okay, that's not my heart rate. Like, as I was starting to wake up, I'm like, it's not my heart rate. Like, am I having a stroke, or like, what's going on? Right. Because this is like it's kind of scary. Like, I didn't know I'd never experienced anything like it before. It's totally novel. And then I opened my eyes, and this thing was flashing, and it was, it wasn't even shining in my eyes. It was like off to the side of the bed, kind of below the level of the bed. And it's just, so anyway, total aside there. What was I talking about again? Lost my train of thought.
The different levels of sleep.
Yeah. So when you get in bed, you're in stage 1
stages.
You're starting to pay less attention. Stage 2 is transitional sleep. Stages 3 and 4, and nomenclature changes, but I'm going to use the old stuff. That's deep sleep. You get into stages 3 and 4, and you can go through brainwaves on this. So basically, stage 1 sleep is the beginning of alpha, right? And stage 2 would be deeper alpha, sort of alpha theta blend. And then there's theta, and then there's delta, the deepest, slowest wave sleep. And then it progresses over time. And after a certain amount of time in this really deep sleep, you start crawling back out, and you go from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, actually past being awake and up to REM. And you do a little bit of REM, and then you come back down, and that's 1 sleep cycle, right? So that architecture should be predictable, fairly, like not down to like the millisecond, but we can say at the beginning of the night, your first sleep cycles tend to be between 90 and 120 minutes. Your first sleep cycle will be predominantly deep sleep, and there'll be a tiny bit of REM. Your last sleep cycle, right before you wake up, is going to be predominantly REM with a tiny bit of deep. And there's different things going on, right? I told you the most anabolic period, right? That's deep sleep. So that's when you're repairing stuff, right? Because we damage ourselves all day, every day, right? And we create waste products, and those waste products have to be removed. And that's all happening during deep sleep. So that's like, the rebuilding, like cleaning up the waste and the rebuilding. And then the REM is more dealing with emotional and cognitive and learning, and like we're reorganizing our brain and our brain chemistry. And then that controls everything. If you think about it, the entire purpose of sleeping is to get ready for tomorrow. and you're using today as the model. Today's the template. Everybody wants to talk about modeling. Okay, what am I going to do tomorrow? Nobody knows, but my guess is it's going to be pretty close to what I did today. So let's get me ready to do that again tomorrow with a little less damage, if possible, right? And so if the contract was signed, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, this body, that it needs 8 hours to reset, and you only give it 6 hours to reset, you don't get the full reset, right? And we can talk about the consequences of that. But to answer your question, when you use things to help you sleep, nothing is making you sleep. There are no sleep drugs anywhere on the market that make you sleep. What they do is they dissociate your neocortex from your lizard brain. And in dissociation, you aren't paying attention to your environment. And if you aren't paying attention to your environment, you think you're sleeping. You could be wide awake playing video games. You could be driving your car to the store, getting a gallon of ice cream, coming home and eating it. You aren't paying attention. Your neocortex is dissociated. Your perception will be that you were asleep all of that time. And so once we found that out, we're like, man, that seems like a pretty big problem. Now, the other thing is that it gets rid of about 80% sleep. So prescription sleep aids ruin about 70 to 80% of REM sleep. So you're only getting now 20 to 30% of REM sleep. And we know that's approximately half the contract we've agreed to, right? Yeah. This 8 hours, half of that's REM, and now we're losing 70 to 80% of that. It seems like a big deal. You're losing 10, 20, maybe up to 30% of deep sleep. That seems like a big deal. If you use alcohol, it's the reverse. You lose about 70 to 80% of the deep sleep, and then you lose 10 to 30% of the REM sleep. So if you use alcohol and sleep drugs, like all the SEALs were doing when I first started this game, they weren't getting either, right? And they were coming to you with the same performance issues that you would expect an obese, pre-diabetic, 65-year-old man to be coming to talk to me about. And the symptoms were exactly the same. Exactly the same. And I didn't recognize it. I mean, this is all retrospectively. I can look back and say, that's what that would look like. But it just doesn't, if you aren't getting the right cycles of sleep, it's not actually sleep, right? It's like eating McDonald's and, packaged foods from the processed aisles in the grocery store. You're eating, you aren't nourishing, right? It's not the same thing. Like, okay, you're getting calories in, you're surviving. You're getting some sleep in, you're surviving, but you aren't even coming close to optimizing, like not anywhere in the neighborhood of it. And all sleep aids do that. All sleep aids, that's what they do. Now, the antihistamines, they work slightly differently. So the sleep drugs and the benzodiazepines, those work on the GABA system, and the GABA is what's supposed to slow the brain down. But they have these drugs. The original biohackers were pharma, and they had this drug, and they said, hey, binding to that receptor on the cell is how GABA works. We're going to make something that works 1,000 times better than GABA. And we're going to put that in your brain, and that's going to really make you sleep. No, it's really going to dissociate your brain. But you're going to think it's sleep, and your subjective experience of sleep isn't that great, right? If we sleep well, we don't really remember sleep. And in fact, the complete absence of memory makes us feel like we slept well. What the hell are these drugs doing? Complete absence of memory. You have no recollection whatsoever. It's like, man, I must have slept really well. Nope. You only slept, let's be generous. You slept 30 minutes more than you would have if you didn't take the drug, but you destroyed 50% of your sleep architecture. So you only got about half the amount of sleep you would have gotten. And you went to bed you fell asleep 30 minutes sooner. So you got about 30% of what you would have gotten if you didn't take the drug, right?
So, okay, the prescription of the counter drugs aside, there are a lot of things on the market, herbal supplements, right, plant medicines, well, actually some things are herbal supplements, other kind of nutritional supplements, melatonin. I mean, you have a product yourself, which I've used. I know a lot of people use it, but can you speak to the more natural approach to assisting one with sleep?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's my dogma. So I produce my products to fit my dogma. And my dogma is this is supplemental. It's meant to restore things that are possibly or even likely to be insufficient in your brain and body around the time your brain's getting ready to go to sleep. Nothing about it does anything to make you go to sleep. It just brings the resources there. you're like, I'm bringing lumber to the construction site. I'm not bringing a construction crew. Like, you have the crew with you. So if your crew sucks, like, it doesn't make a big difference. But you know, that's usually like you know, there's some sort of genetic or metabolic disease staple on sleep if your construction crew is not working, which is really, really rare. So, you know, we can go into detail of that later if you wanted to, but it's basically, if we went to sleep the way we evolved to, right, which is responding to the blue light, but, you know, ambient temperature going down, our core temperature going down, us becoming less active and less involved with our environment, and eventually falling asleep, and then waking up right around the time the sun comes up, because that's when our cortisol wakes us back up. And some of that says our body temperature gets low. There's some cues there. And some of that's just, we're replenished, right? Our brain is constantly sensing what's going on in our body and what's going on in our brain. And it's doing that while you're asleep. I mean, there's many times that your brain's more active while you're asleep than when you're awake. So your brain's not resting. It's like, there's a lot of coordination going on there. And your brain can sense that your body's well rested and the hormones have shifted back to a more wake promoting friendly state, and you're more regenerated, you're more anabolic, and you're ready to hit tomorrow, right? So when you have sleep drugs in there, you don't have those natural cues to wake up because none of that stuff's happening. But if you, regardless of why or how you get short sleep or poor sleep, when you wake up the next day, again, no matter what time you wake up and no matter why you got poor quality, whether it's drugs or stress or like whatever, or you just didn't get enough sleep, regardless of the cause, when you wake up the next morning, you're just simply not as capable. All of that restoration that would have woken you up didn't wake you up. An alarm clock woke you up, or your stress hormones woke you up. Because as I was saying earlier, that your cortisol crawls up over the course of the night, and at some point it gets to a level that's not consistent with sleep, right? And then to go to sleep at night, you have to get lower than that level that wakes you up, right? So your stress hormones have to come down. Well, if we live at super high stress levels, it's harder to go to sleep, and you're going to wake up sooner, right? And then you just aren't simply getting the restoration and recovery. So all sleep drugs are bad. All I did with my product was try to say, this is how we evolved. These are the changes that would have happened. We need these minerals and these vitamins to be able to do this stuff. And hopefully your body does all that. Herbals, there's a lot of herbal research. Like, I've read the research as far as what, like, do these things work clinically? Like, when we do clinical trials, do these things improve sleep, and how much, and what does the sleep architecture look like? There are definitely herbs that help. I'm not educated on them, to be honest, just because it's not my area of expertise, and I don't want to pretend like I know everything. It's enough to just keep up with what I do. Yeah. But there definitely are things that work. You know, ashwagandha lower, you know, that's an adaptogen. It controls your cortisol levels, and if cortisol is affecting your sleep, ashwagandha helps with that, right? Kava, lemongrass, valerian root for sure. There's essential oil, like scents, like lavender scent, and improves the quality of sleep, decreases the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep, extends the amount of sleep you get a little bit. And there's lots of things like that. Basically, my thought with that is, like, we don't have necessarily lavender receptors. So there's like, we don't have like a daily recommended dosage of lavender. So as a medical doctor, I'm not the right guy to make that decision. But my thinking of that is, hey, if it exists in nature and it helps you sleep, to include marijuana and CBD, like if this stuff exists in nature and it's beneficial to your physiology, why not? Like, you know, as long as there's not known poor consequences, right?
Well, and that's a caveat. Let's point out that kava, people should be very careful and talk to their medical professional, right? Because there's some research to suggest that kava has problems with certain people's, I think, kidneys or kidneys.
I think it's liver. I think it's liver toxicity. And I almost mentioned that, but I said, I don't want
to. I'll put the other for you. Yeah. So one last question for you. If you're going to recommend a sleep ritual, mm-hmm. and I'll tease you with like a thought, like blackout blinds or eye shades, don't have certain things in your room, and then do X, Y, and Z, what might those things look like?
Yeah, so I break this into two components, right? So there is, as far as a sleep ritual, it's super simple, really, really simple. Because if you've ever had kids, or if you've ever been a kid, you probably remember this protracted period of getting ready for bed. You don't take a 3-year-old banging trucks and blocks together, throw them in a bed and turn off the light and walk out of the room. No chance of that working. Why? There was no ritual. There was no preparation. So what I talked about earlier, evolutionarily, the way we evolved to be part of this spinning sphere right now is when the light went away, chemicals changed in our brain, our body temperature went down, our neocortex quit being as involved in our environment, we felt tired and we went to sleep, right? Now, in the modern age with electricity and all the stuff that people know about, that gets in the way. And it's not just the light, because it's also the stimulation, because I told you that we have to quit paying attention to our environment. If there's anything causing you to focus to your external environment, that's going to interfere with your sleep, because sleep means, by definition, you're not paying attention to your external environment. You're not worried about your external environment. So sleep hygiene, as far as like, oh, get rid of the light, do this, like, that's really simple. Think about 2,000 years ago, what would have people done? Or go camping for a weekend and figure out what you're doing differently that's allowing you to fall asleep 2 or 3 hours after the sun goes down. Because that's all it is, right? It's baked into the cake. That's super easy. Don't put light in your eyes. Don't stimulate yourself. Try to keep your body temperature down. So don't go exercise. Don't do a CrossFit workout 30 minutes before bed. Don't try to work on a stressful work project right before bed. Don't have an argument with your spouse right before bed. Don't watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre right before bed. No matter what light's going in your eyes, light going in your eyes or not, that's another way to override it. So we can override it by putting light in our eyes. We can override it by stimulating ourselves. And we can override it to some degree to uncomfortable body temperatures, right? Because that's paying attention to our environment, right? So our core temperature drops, the light goes down, our core temperature drops, our brain quits paying attention, and we fall asleep. And that's all there is to sleep hygiene. Now you can extrapolate that to a million things, but basically dark, cold, and quiet. That's it.
Perfect. I love it.
Now, the other part of the sleep ritual, though, this is the more important part. The other part of the sleep ritual is you have to have a sleep ritual. And it doesn't matter if you think you don't need a sleep ritual, because you do need a sleep ritual. And here's why. Because everything that you do as a human being has external cues to let you know that you should be doing those things, or give you feedback as to whether or not you're doing those things right, to include going to sleep. So if I do sleep hygiene correctly, but I'm stressed out of my mind, no help, doesn't do any good. So the other component of that is you have to agree to two things. First, you have to agree that sleep is super important. If you don't agree with that, that's the number one thing. Spend 5 hours on the internet, do your own research, convince yourself should be your top priority, but is at least way up there on your priority list. You're 90% of the way there at that point, just knowing that. Because if I said, hey, I'll give you $10 million to sleep 8 hours a night for the next 30 days, who wouldn't figure out a way to do it? Everybody would figure out a way to do it. If you care enough, you'll figure out a way to do it. So first, get yourself to care enough. Secondly, realize that you can do this sleep ritualization, which is easy to do. And you can figure out what's specific for you and your environment and your house, and like how you handle that in relation to other family. Like your situation is unique, but you can get those concepts down, and you can fine tune those concepts over the course of months or years, like get your sleep better. But how do you control the stress? So I said, there's two things. One, realize sleep is important. Two, realize that the very best you ever are is after a good night of sleep. So if you have stressful things to deal with, or even stressful things to worry about, there's no better time than after you've rested really well. The absolute worst time is when you're poorly rested. The longer you're awake, the worse your functioning is, right? If you're awake for 24 hours, you don't function nearly as well as if you've been awake for 6 hours or 12 hours, and you still don't function as well as if you would have been awake for 6 hours, right? We progressively get worse over the course of the day. So the worst thing you could possibly do is to say, hey, it's 3 a.m. I just woke up. I'm going to think about my bankruptcy, or I'm going to plan what I'm going to say tomorrow in divorce court, or what? No, absolutely the wrong thing, right? That's like saying, hey, I'm going to give you 8 months to prepare for a competition that's critical to your life and well-being. And at 4 months, you're like, nah, I don't need the other 4 months. Let's go. No one would do that. And sleep's the same way. You don't do that after 4 hours of sleep. So I tell people, take a piece of paper, draw a line straight down the middle of it, right? Vertical line. On the left side, you write your to-do list. And that's dependent upon you. Whether it's what you have to do the next day or what you have to do for the next 6 months, I don't care. Like, how far out do you think? To-do list, everything you can possibly think of that you need to do. And you do this during the day when your brain's functioning well and you're not tired and you're well fed. And then on the right side of the line, that's the to worry list. And the to worry list is crap you have no control over, but you don't want to forget to worry about it. So we're going to make sure we give you the opportunity to worry about it. Because if you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, I won't think about this tomorrow, man, and I really need to think about it. So it's going to be on the list. Now I have my list, everything I need to do, everything I need to worry about. Now the agreement is, this is the second part, I am the best at handling this list after sleep. So until I sleep, I'm not going to think about that list. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm not going to think about the list. It's on the list. I'm going to handle it when I wake up. So now we have our sleep ritual. We know we need time to get ready to go to bed. I recommend an hour, whatever you can do. If it's only 30 minutes and that's all you're going to do, then that's it. But you set an alarm clock to give yourself enough time to engage in your sleep ritual. You get into bed. You set an alarm clock to get you out of bed. Even if you don't need an alarm clock, you set an alarm clock. And then you put that alarm clock under your bed or in your drawer or under a towel so that you don't see it. And you make a pact. I'm going to handle my list when my morning alarm clock goes off. So my nighttime alarm clock and my morning alarm clock are equally as important. When I wake up in the morning to my alarm, I get up and I get after my list. Before that, I don't think about my list. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and I don't have a clock, first of all, I don't know what time it is. So that saves me a lot of stress right there. Because as soon as I know what time it is, I start doing mental math about, well, okay, hell, and maybe I should just get up and and now I'm thinking about all sorts of stuff and I'm waking myself up, right? I'm overcoming the lack of attention to my external world. So my alarm clock goes, I wake up in the middle of the night. I have no idea what time it is. If I need to go to the bathroom, I get up, I go to the bathroom, I come back, I lay back down on my bed and I say, you know what? My alarm clock might be going off in 5 minutes. I'm going to lay here and relax. I'm going to do some breath work. I'm going to do some visualization. I'm going to do progressive muscle relaxation. I'm going to meditate, whatever it is I can do to distract myself and not think about my external environment and just lay there calmly until my alarm goes off. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go back to sleep. If your alarm clock goes off 30 minutes later, great. You got 7.5 hours of sleep. You got 30 minutes of meditation. You're ready. Get after it. Right? And no matter how long it takes you to fall asleep, and no matter what time you wake up, your focus is the same. I'm not going to think about my external environment. It's on the list. If there's something I forgot on the list, I give you permission, get up and put that on the list and go back to bed. I'm not thinking about anything on my list because I'm going to handle that when I'm prepared, and I'm prepared in the morning. Right now is my time to get prepared. I'm going to sit here and prepare.
Nice.
And that's awesome. It. Like that's 100% of sleep hygiene right there. Those two things.
That. Now you have a book, you've given talks, you have a product. Where can people learn more about your whole work?
So Doc Parsley is short for doctor, DOCPARSLEY, like the herb, docparsley.com. It's got everything, my TED Talk, my podcast. So we'll put this podcast on there if you want to talk to my people. We cross promote stuff. Lots of lectures I've done on there, blogs, information about my product, my book, ebooks. There's all sorts of stuff you can get on there. Anybody want to geek out on sleep, there's a lot of geeky sleep information on there.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes. Kirk, great to see you. Great to talk to you. And stay safe out there, man.
I will. I'm always safe, man.
Right on.